Welcome back to the dopest show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. I also got quite a few stories about the wild stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison. You want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So I touched on this story the other day, but I'm just going to give the whole thing right now from start to finish. So there's this fella, he's a tattoo artist. He'd like to claim he's an Aryan Brotherhood member, but lightning bolts, like people getting lightning bolts tattooed on them, it's something they have to earn, like by putting in work, which means doing acts of violence in order for the organization. Well, he basically, he had those, and he liked to talk about how he got them and brag about how he got them. But for people who'd been there for a minute, he tattooed them lightning bolts on himself. Okay, there's this guy just wanted to be a part of it so bad, and he watched enough Gangland, enough TV, and all that. Now, he wasn't a bad tattoo artist. I can't say that. I can't say he was an awful tattoo artist. He was an awful person. He was annoying. If there weren't certain people around, he would say racist comments. He said a lot of stuff that just made him a very unlikable person. And typically in prison, something anybody who's been I'm sure they can agree with this. Tattoo artists, pretty frequently, they'll have like this little assistant. They'll have somebody that looks up to them, who's always around them, always hanging with them. They usually keep watch, like they'll keep watch to make sure a CO isn't coming, and they assist them. Basically, they become like their little punk boy that does whatever they want for them. The irony of the situation of this guy and his assistant was actually getting money on the street, like a lot of money. He was tied in with some stuff. Now, he was a dorky kid, and he was, little guy. He wasn't like, you wouldn't guess it. But, when it comes to dealing and stuff, it's a lot of the time the biggest dealers that I have met were not the most street hood, bad, tough people. They were people that had access to people that had a lot of money, and they had a network in which they could distribute it. Like colleges, places like that. Think about it. If you're selling to streetwalkers and stuff like that, how much money are people going to make versus, let's say, where I live, Roanoke College. It's one of the most expensive colleges in the country if you're from out of state. With mom and dad's money to spend it all up. So yeah, this little guy was actually doing it. Nobody would have guessed it though, And he was his little guy who just did whatever he said, So I had a conversation with him one time. And, he was trying to convince me of how bad this tattoo artist, how bad he actually was. He didn't want to mess with him and he was tough. And I was like, man, I think he's got you a little bit, hyped up, thinking he's a little bit tougher and better than he. He said, nah, he's not somebody you want to mess with. And he told me that he would give people hepatitis C that nagged him too much, bugged him too much. He told me this. That freaked me all the way out. Now, this guy had a bad habit. He wouldn't do a tattoo until he'd been paid. And he'd start that tattoo. But as anybody who's been in prison or jail knows, it's very rare that you get a tattoo done in one sitting unless it's a very small tattoo. So he would get a tattoo started and then he wouldn't finish it for months and months on end. So of course, people are going to bug him to finish it, okay? And that happened frequently. That happened all the time. Now, before I had been told by his little buddy about him giving people stuff, there were a number of things that had happened with a couple different people that had came back from medical one day, and they just didn't seem right. They seemed like something was very wrong. Okay? Somebody gets some news like that, they got hepatitis C in prison, or at all. A lot of people are going to keep that secret out of shame and everything else. But looking back at it in retrospect, I can think of these couple people and how they just basically were not the same after that. Something had happened mentally once they came back, and it makes sense. And those people, I'm all but certain those were a couple of the people that this happened with. Now, there were certain people, he would talk about everybody. everybody on the planet, he would talk about everybody just about. I mean, seriously, this was just a grumpy prick. Now, he drug addict. Okay, he'd do whatever drugs he could get his hands on. That's why he was always wanting to do a new one to get paid so he could pay for the drugs that he was doing. In addition to the regular drugs that get smuggled in prisons, which, a lot of the time that isn't consistent. That's hit and miss. I knew at the medium security whenever dope hit the compound, because I'd have, 5-10 people come ask me to borrow stamps. Stamps were money there. And they'd ask me to borrow stamps because they needed to hit it. The only person I ever let borrow stamps for that, ironically, also a tattoo person, was Satan. And he was actually a real Aryan Brotherhood member who was at USP McCrary before he ended up in Petersburg. And because he'd pay me back. He was good on his word with paying that back. But the rest of the people, I'd tell no, and typically they'd end up having to go to the DMI guys, and Steve Hood would end up loaning them the money and getting them in the hole where they ended up in a debt for probably months on end after that. But anyway, at the low security and at the medium security, pill line. Pill line has medications like gabapentin or Neurontin. That's a popular one. That was probably the most popular one there was, most common one there was. They'd sell 3 of them of the 600 milligram ones. They called that a set, is what they call that. And a set went for $5. That's what they sold that for. 5 of them for $5 for 3 600 milligram Neurontin. They also did the same thing with Wellbutrin. The same thing for the 100 milligram ones. Now the time release Wellbutrin, which were 150 milligrams, that was a whole different ballpark. That was like a real drug to people. That did something different. Okay, that had people like, where they were like, it seemed like they was really on like, like they was on crystal or something. Like they'd be, I'd say more like coke, because they end up like scared, paranoid on it almost even. It's some wild stuff. Now he did that type of thing regularly anytime he'd get his hands on. So even though the other drugs weren't as consistent, the pill line drugs were a constant, and he'd always be wasting it on that. So what ended up happening that basically let people know, it kind of exposed the whole thing. You know what I mean? You don't talk about too much business. His little assistant shouldn't have said that to me even, but I'm not getting involved in business. I'm close to getting out of this prison. It's not my job. The number one job you have in prison, and a lot of people ask on other people's pages, well, why didn't you do nothing? Why didn't you do? Okay, I get involved in something, and I get a whole bunch more time. You never know how far somebody's going to take it in a fight. Your job in prison is to get out as, problem-free as you can. To get back home to your family. Okay, people say, yeah, it's my boy, it's my friend, all this other stuff. You're going to tell your family that when you get another 10 or 20 years? No, I'm not. Shoot. And I let people in there know that. I let people know, I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral in all situations. Shoot. But anyhow, they ended up having everybody from our building go to the gym. In the gym, there were bleachers. We had to sit on the bleachers. This was not typical. This was something I never saw happen before or since. They had everybody from our building, which our building had about 150 people. Some buildings had as many as 300 people. But the 150 people at my building had to all go to the gym. And we think it's a shakedown because they make you go out on the rec yard for a few hours where they tore a building up. There was one time, they found a phone charger, but they didn't find the phone. But the phone charger, that was enough for them to know. The guy actually ran from it was some wild stuff. That's another story, though. But we all think it's a shakedown. So basically, there are people there that are in positions of power from the prison. Okay? Warden wasn't there. You rarely ever see him. But anyway, some of the people that were there were, the higher ups, but not like the warden. Like, I guess it was AW or something like that, which is like assistant warden. And then you have lieutenant. But the people that were there that really made me wonder what was going on before they started doing things it seemed like everybody I'd ever seen at medical was there. Okay? And basically, they let us know, they told all of us, listen, y'all need to quit tattooing in your building, this, and that, whatever you're doing. If you're doing drugs, if you're doing tattoos, whatever you're doing, you need to stop. they said, okay, first off, this is a bad place to get tattoos and stuff like that. And, you know, people from D.C. are going to be mad about this. But they straight up tell you this. There's an HIV awareness class that if you take, it gives you a couple points off. Your points can drop you down to a lower custody. They tell you in that HIV awareness class, listen, certain neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. have as high as 40% infection rates in HIV. That means certain blocks in Washington, D.C., 4 in 10 people have HIV. That's a high rate now. So they basically go through that whole spiel. And then they go through the spiel about hepatitis C. And they basically let us know that there have been multiple people in our building. They said not one, not two. There's been a handful of you guys. And they say, y'all know who you are, and the ones of you who don't, that have been messing with tattoos, you probably want to get yourself, you probably want to make an appointment down to medical, get tested. You'd ask them to test you. You'd do that. But anyway, they let them know there's something going on in your building where people just started getting hepatitis C. This is an issue. You know, something spread. Y'all need to be aware of this so you can quit doing and just be aware. And everybody was like, what the... You know, everybody's worried. Everybody's got a tattoo. They're freaking out now. Everybody is worried. Everybody is freaking out. Now, there is a guy in the building who was the wrong person to mess with. I assume he already knew that he had gotten hepatitis C. Now, he had gotten tattoos from multiple people. We had multiple people in that building that did tattoos. There were some very talented artists, okay? And it was hard to tell with this and that where along the point somebody may have gotten it. Now, these people that had hepatitis C, they're not coming back to the building saying, hey, I got hepatitis C. Where could it have been? A lot of these people, you know, they weren't going to speak about it, but by knowing this, it lets them know this has been something recent. This wasn't one of my old tattoos I got 6 months, a year ago. This wasn't one I got 2 or 3 years ago. This was a recent tattoo that I had to have gotten this from. Now, one of those people out of the bunch was a big old jacked gang member. He's a Crip. And whenever we got back to the building, you know, you'd see he was angry. He was in this state. Like, he had this face that just like, he had hate in his eyes. He had the devil in his eyes. Like, you see, like, certain looks that people have. This guy had it, okay? Now, what was a little bit wild about the situation was a lot of people get some information like this, and it sets them off. They're going to make, you know, a straight line of that person. They're going to wear them out. They're going to do whatever they want to do to that person, right? This guy did not do anything right away. He didn't do it right away. And see, there's a couple other people from, you know, his gang in there too. Now, it's mostly Bloods, if we're being honest about it. Bloods, you know, outnumber them by a good many, especially on the East Coast. That's just the way it is. But he waited. He waited and he waited, and there was a right guard that was working that was lazy. In the summertime, there's no air conditioning. The guard has an office that's about the size, a little bit bigger than a closet. It's got a computer, a desk, but it's got a window AC. It's nice and cool. In the summer, you're not getting your room searched much. It would get so hot on certain days that, you know, just standing, like if the cop had stood out there, you know, waiting to open the door to let us go out to eat for 15, 20 minutes because they released the buildings one by one, you'd start seeing sweat come out of there where they're used to being that cool. So the guard, you know, just stay in that office with the door closed. A little ways, there's another door. Over the stairs, there's another door. Go up those stairs, there's another door. There's a lot of doors between the guard's office and the upstairs part of this building. You could scream as loud as you wanted, and he could not hear you down in that office. Now, typically, when they do a 10-minute move, what would happen was every hour the compound opens for a 10-minute move for where you go, wherever you need to go. Rec, to whatever work you have, wherever you want to go, it opens for 10 minutes. Now, once the guard opens the door, they do a round. They do a round around the building, which they're supposed to do, at least once every hour, and the guard did their round. Just make sure everything's okay. After that, he's in his office. Okay? After he went back in his office, the big guy that was a Crip, he had his buddy watching to see if that guard was coming, and he told the guy, "Come here, I need to holler at you for a minute." And basically, he tortured this guy. He tortured him. He beat him up, choked him till it sounded like till he fell unconscious. Then he'd wake up by punching him again, and then he'd choke him till he went unconscious. Then he'd wake him up, punching him again. And this went on for a long time. This guy's eyes, both swelled completely. Like, you talk about pumpkin head. He's pumpkin head. Not the worst one I'd ever seen. Now this guy's a big old dude who's doing this. Lifts a lot of weight. He's mean as could be when he wants to be. But he was really a cool dude. In general. But I remember back to it. I remember back to him telling a man, "Come on, I done paid you this money. You're not going to sit here and make me wait for this tattoo like this." He's like, "Well, I've got to get around." He'd make excuses in this. And I'm assuming that was his reasoning. It also could have been, he could have done it just because, he's the fake AB guy could have done it just because he's a piece of trash. Just because he didn't like him, because of race, anything else like that. That's how bad of a sick. You know what I mean? He's just sick, messed up in the head. But this guy wore him out awful. And it went on for a long, long time. And then he told him, "You need to go down there and you need to check in." He said, "You need to do that right now." So he went down there, he checked in. Well, of course he checks in and he knows he can't come back out. People know it was him. He should have known what was coming. What he did, and he should have got out of there for, because there are multiple people that want to do something to him. Not everybody will act when they want to do something, though. Some people, you'd be surprised how many people will not fight. This guy wasn't one of them. So, tattoo artist goes to the hole. He goes to the shoe, and a couple days later, the big man, the Crip, he ends up going to the shoe too. We never saw either one of them people again. Never saw the tattoo artist, never saw the Crip ever again after that. There were a lot of whispers about a lot of people possibly having this after that. And yeah, so basically, just also, which I spoke on in the other video that I had done on this, the main way hepatitis C is passed is not through a needle. It's through ink. You're supposed to drip drop it from above into a container. If you touch the nozzle to the thing, it can infect an entire bottle. So most people that get hepatitis C from a tattoo get it from the ink. They don't get it from the needle. From what I gather, he had a special bottle of ink, and from certain things that were said, I think that he used his own blood and that he had hepatitis C. Some people get something like that and they're bitter. They're angry at God, angry at the world, everything else. Some people just pieces of trash. But basically, yeah. It's one of them things, you don't even know what to say. It's just awful. It's like the worst thing ever. And it just paranoids, They got a lot of treatments for that. You see the commercials on TV about it. Used to be interferon, which, one of my friends, Jonesy, he had to go through that. It's basically like chemo, but it sounds like nowadays there's a couple pills that you could take for 90 days, and there was another one that people take for 60 days, and they get rid of it. But yeah. I still wouldn't want it. I'm scared to death of stuff like that. It terrifies me. I mean, shoot. So anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, it's 20 minutes and 4 seconds of your life in which you'll never get back. But I hope you liked it, though. There's a kid. I believe it's Logan Price Productions. I'm going to put the link in there. But there's this kid. He makes these little videos with Sonic and some other stuff like that. He's got Asperger's, okay? I have similar, something similar with how I function. This kid puts a lot of time into these little videos and stuff like that, and being somewhere on the spectrum, it's something he takes pride in. He's gotten a good handful. He's got a couple hundred subscribers doing these little videos. He's a kid. He's a little kid. He's like 10 years old. Knowing how little things like this would mean the world to me when I was a kid, especially how my mind worked different, I'm going to leave a link to this kid's little YouTube channel up on there. It would mean a lot to me if you would go on there, subscribe, and just tell him he's doing. I don't even know if you could comment, since it might be content for kids. But if you can comment, just tell him, "Wow, that's incredible! Oh my God, it's amazing!" It would mean the world to him. Things like that. That would mean more to me than you even leaving a comment or liking this video. If I could get this kid to get like 100 subscribers just from saying something on here, that would mean more to me. So if you was going to comment or like or something on here, you can save that comment for him. That would mean more to me. I think it's Logan Price Productions. If I'm going to put the link down in there. I'll probably put it in the description or in the comments. But if you just take the 10 seconds to do it, it would make this little kid's life, it would make his world. Because when your mind functions like mine does, and I was his age, of course, once, I know what him putting his time and work into something like this obsessively, probably very, very obsessively, and seeing that you get positive feedback, it means the world to a kid anyway, but to a kid that's mind works a little bit differently. I know, because my mind works a little bit differently, same as his. It would mean the world to me. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll leave a link up to that. And if I'm getting the name right, Logan Price Productions, I'm about positive that's what it is. If you just type that in and you see the one with like Sonic on it, Sonic the Hedgehog, it'll be like a little cartoon. It's the only one with that when you type it in. Okay. It would mean a whole lot to me, but it would mean the world to this little guy. Okay? So please consider it. So I hope you liked the video.